Norway controls $1.9 trillion. It is the largest sovereign wealth fund ever built. The global model for prosperity and prudence. Yet 209 municipalities just posted deficits. Debt has topped 750 billion kroner. Towns are losing doctors, shutting down services, sliding towards state receivership. The money exists. It is locked behind a single fiscal rule, and that rule has a history. Oil changed everything. In 1969, drillers struck crude beneath the North Sea, setting off a wave of optimism and anxiety in equal measure. Norway, once a modest country of fishermen and civil servants, suddenly faced the prospect of windfalls on a scale few could imagine. Politicians and economists warned of the dangers that came with such luck. The lessons of other countries, where sudden wealth led to inflation, wasted opportunity, and bitter inequality, were fresh in the minds of the Storting Norway's parliament. The phrase "Dutch disease" echoed through committee rooms, a reminder that easy money could poison an economy as easily as it could enrich it. Oil and Dutch disease. By the late 1970s, white papers and parliamentary debates circled around a single question: how could Norway avoid becoming another cautionary tale? The answer took shape slowly. Instead of spending the oil money as it came in, lawmakers argued for a system that would separate petroleum revenue from the day-to-day economy. The goal was clear: to protect future generations and prevent a boom from turning into a bust. Protect future. In 1990, the Storting passed the Petroleum Fund Act. The law established a new sovereign wealth fund, what would become the Government Pension Fund Global. The statute was blunt. Oil money would be collected by the state, invested only outside Norway, and managed by Norges Bank, the central bank. The capital itself could not be spent at home. It would serve as a financial firewall, with the government allowed to tap only the expected returns, not the principal. The fund was designed to be a buffer against volatility, a mechanism to smooth out the unpredictable swings of global oil markets. Petroleum Fund. The decision drew international attention. Economists from the IMF and the World Bank praised Norway's restraint, calling the new fund a model of prudence and discipline. The foreign-only investment rule set the country apart. No direct stakes in Norwegian companies, no financing of local projects, no temptation to use the fund as a political tool. The architects of the policy made their intentions plain. This was not a municipal piggy bank, nor a shortcut to easy spending. It was a trust for the future, built on the conviction that wealth should be preserved, not frittered away. Prudence. By the turn of the millennium, Norway's oil fund was already being held up as an example for resource-rich nations everywhere. But the same structure that earned global admiration would also create a paradox. The money was real, the rules were strict, and for the towns and local services facing shortfalls, the wealth remained just out of reach. Paradox. Norway's sovereign wealth is guarded by a set of statutory rules designed to keep temptation at bay. At the center sits the fiscal rule, first adopted in 2001 and revised over the years, which limits annual government withdrawals from the fund to the expected real return, currently set at 3% of the fund's market value. This ceiling is not a suggestion, but a hard legal limit, spelled out in ministry memos and reinforced by parliamentary consensus. The fiscal rule's wording is unambiguous. Only the central government may draw from the fund, and only up to the 3% guideline, calculated on a moving average to dampen the effects of market swings. The rationale is rooted in macroeconomic caution. Lawmakers feared that spending more, especially in good years, would stoke inflation, push up wages, and undermine the competitiveness of Norwegian industry. The fund's architects insisted that wealth must be preserved for future generations, not spent in a single political cycle. The fiscal rule is often described as a firewall, separating the vast pool of oil money from day-to-day politics and the volatility of the domestic economy. Another pillar of the legal architecture is the absolute ban on domestic investment. The Petroleum Fund Act of 1990 mandates that the fund's capital shall not be invested in Norway. This prohibition is restated in 2005 investment guidelines and remains in force today. Norges Bank Investment Management, which stewards the fund, is barred from holding Norwegian stocks, bonds, or real estate. The logic is straightforward. Investing at home would risk overheating the economy and could invite political interference, as local leaders might lobby for infrastructure projects or bailouts. Instead, every krone is sent abroad, a deliberate move to keep the fund's influence outside Norwegian borders. These rules are not merely technicalities. They have profound consequences for municipal budgets. Local authorities cannot access the fund directly, no matter how dire their circumstances. All withdrawals must be routed through the national budget, and even then only the share permitted by the 3% rule. Attempts to loosen these restrictions, whether through special transfers, targeted grants, or proposals for a local oil dividend, have been consistently rejected by the Ministry of Finance, citing the need to uphold macro stability and fiscal discipline. The result is a system in which the country's oil wealth is both real and untouchable for most communities. The legal firewall, built to protect against excess, now stands as a barrier for towns facing shrinking revenues and rising costs. The vault is full, but the key remains in Oslo, locked by statute and guarded by the logic of long-term stability. In 2024, Norway's municipal finances crossed a threshold that could no longer be ignored. According to the latest official accounts, 209 of 428 municipalities ended the year with operating deficits, nearly half the country's local governments spending more than they took in. The combined debt on municipal balance sheets reached approximately 750 billion kroner, a figure that has climbed sharply over the past decade. Behind these numbers is a growing sense of alarm. The Ministry of Local Government's own stress tests now predict that between 50 and 100 municipalities could be placed on the ROBEC register by 2027. Entry on this list is not a formality. It triggers external financial oversight, stripping local councils of the power to make independent budget decisions until they can restore balance. The warning signs have not gone unnoticed. In a televised statement, the mayor of Levanger described the town's 91 million kroner shortfall as the gravest fiscal challenge in living memory, pointing to proposals as drastic as charging municipal employees for office coffee. Across the country, similar stories are surfacing. Councils are debating layoffs, cutting public services, or halting investment in infrastructure just to keep the lights on. The ROBEC watch list, once a tool for rare emergencies, now looms over entire regions. Municipalities facing inclusion must submit every financial decision for state approval, a process that can stall even basic repairs or school funding. The prospect of losing fiscal autonomy is no longer hypothetical for dozens of towns. It is an imminent reality, driven by a debt load that shows no sign of easing. These figures form the hard edge of Norway's paradox, a nation celebrated for its sovereign wealth, but with towns on the brink of insolvency, counting every krone and facing the threat of outside control. In Finnmark, the northernmost county, daily life reveals the human cost of Norway's fiscal firewall. Over 10% of residents there lack a regular general practitioner, the highest rate of unmet primary care in the country. For many, finding a doctor means hours of travel or waiting weeks for an appointment. Life expectancy for women in Finnmark now trails the national average by more than 2 years, a gap that has widened as local health budgets shrink. In towns like Vardø and Kautokeino, council meetings are dominated by talk of staff cuts and service reductions, not new investments. The strain is not limited to patients. A young junior doctor, recently assigned to a rural clinic outside Hammerfest, describes 12-hour shifts, back-to-back on-call nights, and an ever-growing roster of patients. In 2023, a national advocacy group formed to address the rising suicide risk among early career physicians. Their statement warned that the cumulative workload had crossed safe thresholds and called for a national review of duty hours. In northern counties, the shortage of junior doctors reached 23%, leaving emergency rooms and clinics chronically understaffed. Norway's wealth, measured by the $1.9 trillion sovereign fund, is real, but the gains are not evenly shared. The top 10% of households now control 53% of all net wealth, while the share of Norwegians living in low-income households has climbed to 10.1%. Single-parent families face an 18% poverty rate, the highest risk group in the latest national report. These numbers are not abstractions. They show up in empty clinics, in schools with fewer teachers, and in families forced to relocate south for better opportunities. For residents in Finnmark and across the north, the promise of oil wealth feels distant. The legal and fiscal walls that protect Norway's future prosperity have left many communities fighting for basic services today. The paradox deepens. The richer the country becomes on paper, the more some towns are left behind. Norway's wealth fund, worth $1.9 trillion, sits beyond the reach of towns, where deficits and debt now shape daily life. As 209 municipalities struggle, the core question remains: who benefits from national prosperity? Until structural barriers shift, wealth on paper won't guarantee security in people's homes. Share your perspective below.